Hello folks, and welcome to the channel, or welcome back. And this is the first video on working on the Cooper project. Now this is not really a Cooper. I want to make that straight from the start. This is an ordinary Mini. Somebody actually has it dressed up already, and I got it for a very good price. Now the question is it really good? I did a quick inspection when I bought it, but then again I didn't look at all the details. I've seen a few points at that time, but I'll let the previous owner go to the control technique or the technical inspection, and I have the report on the bonnet, and let's have a closer look on what the report says. And after that we will do a full inspection on the car to see what else I still have to do on this vehicle to make it a bit better. So let's check out that paper. Where I live, every car needs to be inspected at a special station every year if the car is older than, I think, 3 or 4 years. Now this car had a special inspection for old-timers. Nevertheless, that inspection is about the same now as for any other car because the car isn't that old. And you can see it's a 1982 vehicle, and it's a 1000 cc, so it's a very small engine, and it's going to be inspected as an old-timer, as you can see right here, and it's valid for 2 years. Now over here you typically find the things that are wrong with it. Now what I see is that it says, actually, unfortunately it's in Flemish, but it says items to keep a close eye on. And I have a bit of an issue. It says there is a leak of some liquid somewhere. It's sweating. Well, I would say to them it's muscle sweat, but in this case it's only a 1000 cc, so it cannot be muscle sweat of the engine. But that is an issue, so I got to find out where that is, and I want to fix that one. The rest is not important. That's the low emission zone, so it actually tells you that you're not allowed to drive this car in the low emission zone, and that's all there is to it. There is actually on the outside no rust on this vehicle, and if there was rust then they must have covered it up. But I checked it with a magnet and I don't feel any bad areas where they might have just used polyester to fill up holes. There's a lot of very weak areas, like over here you always need to check. And there's many other areas on the Mini that are very notorious for rust. So I checked all these areas, and maybe I do a special video on that one. And on the outside that's looking quite good. Now the paint job itself, it's not bad, but it has a lot of dust in it. So, and let me show you a few of those areas where we have dust in it, but it doesn't really matter. I can polish that out, I guess. And for the rest, I think that's quite all right. And this is a bit of a close-up on the front fender. A big chunk right there of dust in the paint. And in this area, you see some more dust. Not really a big deal, but still I need to get this out. I don't like this kind of dust onto a fender, especially not when it's very visible. Another area on the outside is this whole seam here, and that's where two panels are being spot welded together, and it goes all the way from the top of the roof and then all the way down to the bottom of the wheel arch. And normally there should be a cover or something over it, a sleeve that goes over it, and there is none on that. Now that's something I will have to order up because I just don't want to leave it like this. But at least I can see how good it is, which is a positive thing. So you know it's not been messed around with, and it's in a fairly good state. On the edge of the roof here you see that trim, and this seems to be like a new trim, and that's the kind of same trim I'm going to need on the side here, which is going down to the top of the wheel arch. It's the same kind of arrangement I need to do. So they did it in one area but not in the other area. Now they installed some caps around the wheel arches. Now the inside of the wheel arches are clean. I double checked that, and we'll see it in a minute when we look at the car from below. But these wheel arches or these caps are just screwed on with Parker screws, and there's a bit of a gap in between. So I'm going to put a seal behind that. That's going to be a bit better. And then over here, it's the same thing as in the front where they put the panels together. There's supposed to be a trim that goes over it. Now let's have a look at the boot, how that looks like. I think the boot is looking quite all right. The edges are clean, there's no rust. And inside the boot itself, things look all right, but I can see already a few little issues that I want to fix. Now the boot inside looks clean. There's a bit of loose cables. See, this is like a cable which is hanging loose and they didn't tie it down. That's something I'm going to do because that's going to rattle, and I hate rattles on a car. But we need to focus on the battery area. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see it better. Have a look on the positive side of the battery. This cable is going back through the chassis, and look, it's fit in there, but there is no grommet. So over time, this is going to rub and you're going to short out the battery. Great thing to catch fire. I don't want to sound too negative, but sometimes you need to look at these small details because they can be dangerous. And it's a bit strange that the technical inspection doesn't pick up on these vital things. Nevertheless, let's look a bit closer on the rest of this vehicle. What else I see is that there's some paint damage here, there's some paint damage there. And if you wonder why that is, well, that is because the bonnet hits it too deep. And the reason is there is no rubber seal around the edge of the bonnet. So no water seal. So that's another one we'll need to put up. So once we have that up, we won't have that problem anymore. Now the other thing I'm going to do is to put a protective cover inside the bonnet and lock down all the cables. So let's go around a bit further. Let's look at the front bonnet or the hood, and then we look a little bit inside the engine bay, and then we're going to lift up the car to see some more things, if there is anything to be seen. I have to say that the front of the car looks very clean. The bumpers are nice, the grille is nice. I think they just painted it black. Initially there must have been chrome. Now to open up the bonnet, this car doesn't have an internal lock or unlocking system. You have to do it on the front and top it like this, and then open that up, and then support with a stud. I can see a couple of things right away here, and that is that again we have no water seals anywhere around the whole boot area or the bonnet area. So that is something I will add as well, and I will add soundproof into the bonnet itself or the hood, whatever you want to call it, guys, but I'm going to put some sound insulation onto that. That is always a lot nicer. But the engine bay looks quite clean. I noticed a new radiator cap, very good. A nice chrome valve cover. The engine looks very tight. It has no leaks anywhere, so that's good. It has the carburetor, which is the, I think it's a HIF 4T or 4, I'm not sure what they call them, with a KN filter in the back. But what I noticed is they blocked off the vacuum. Not sure why they did that. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I also noticed that the distributor has no vacuum connected. That's a bit odd, but let's have a look on this in a few minutes. And what else? The brake fluid, that's something I will replace, and I don't know what's inside, but it's an easy check to do. You can suck some out and then try to mix it with water, and then you will find out if it mixes well with water, then it is probably a .4. If it doesn't mix with water, then, and you keep the bubbles separate, then it's probably silicone based. You got to make sure that you don't mix silicone based brake fluid with non-silicone based brake fluid. So that's something I need to check. I will have to bleed the brakes anyway. The clutch reservoir, that looks good as well. So I think overall this is not too bad. I also see here a Carter vent, which is good. Let's have a bit of a closer look on the intake manifold. What I can see here is that the intake manifold is a modified one, because now this is a cooled version. Now that is good. But here you can actually see that they blocked off the vacuum on the carburetor. so we're going to change that anyway. So I'm going to replace this carburetor with a Weber DCOE 40, which is a twin barrel carburetor, so I have to change the intake manifold anyhow. So that's one thing, but for the rest I think this looks pretty nice and clean. Another good check is always look at the valve cover, and if you see white foam on the cover itself or inside, then you know there's something wrong with it. But this looks quite alright, and inside it looks quite clean. Okay, yeah, it looks like a new belt as well that's on it. The water pump looks new. Yeah, not too bad. So let's have a look on the distributor, how that one looks like. Spark plug leads are looking very nice and tidy. They look like new, so that's a good point. Let me open up the distributor cap and see what we have inside. This is still, I don't know if you can see it, but let me get a light so you can actually see it. So with the distributor cap off, you can actually see that it has still breaker points, and that's something I don't like. And as I told you before, the vacuum, which is here, which is for the advance, is removed. So I don't know what they've done with the distributor. Maybe they changed the bob weights inside. Who knows, because that can create advance as well, but normally your vacuum is giving you more advance. So I'm going to change this with an electronic version. So let me put this guy back up. So there we go. No, it starts pretty well and it drives fairly well. I took it on a test ride, and that is all quite good, so that is not an issue. All right, I think this is good enough for the engine bay. I might want to check the compression later, see how much compression I have on every cylinder. That is always a good check, but I suspect that this will be quite all right. Let me check as well the oil level. Now the oil, yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, you know, it's halfway between min and max, but there's at least no water inside, so that looks good. I'm going to replace the oil anyway, and the oil filters and so on. So yeah, that looks all pretty good. The tag on the engine block is still on it, which is a good sign, and it's a 99H97P11518. So I can check this once I'm in the house to find out exactly what this motor is. Right, so I'm going to remove the spark plugs and see how they look like, and then we do a small compression test. I know they had to fiddle with the carburetor to get it passed to the technical inspection for carbon dioxide or emissions. So they may be a bit lean for the moment, but let's find out. Oh, long neck one, so, oh, that doesn't look too bad. I think it's a little bit on the rich side. It's black. All of them look a bit the same. I think it's running a little bit rich. It's a bit on the dark side. I would rather have this kind of brownish tone on it. Not white, that's too lean and too hot. But right here, I think it's a little bit on the rich side. So we'll change that. So let me place this aside and do a compression test. So we're going to install a compression meter and just turn it in. Oops. So I'm going to get inside the car and we're going to crank it up. "13 kilograms, near to 14. This is real good. So now we'll do in cylinder number 2. And that is spot on 12. All right, so let's move it to cylinder number 3. All right. And we've got 12 spot on. And now we're going to test number 4. And that is as good as 12 as well. So, good. What I can say is that the compression test is really good. All 4 cylinders are having around 12 kilograms, and that is good, and that is a gold engine, so I'm quite happy with that. And so far, I think the engine is quite all right. I know they worked on the differential. They put a new differential up. You can actually see it on the casing as well. But I promise you a test ride once I have everything fixed and sorted out. Now, the only other thing I still might want to do is to modify the camshaft, because this is still a standard camshaft inside, as far as I can tell. So, I think enough of this. I'm going to put the spark plugs back, and I'm going to crank it up once just to see that it runs, and we'll check the smoke in the back if it's smoking or not. Now, before I put the spark plugs back in, I'm just going to give them a little bit of engine oil on the tread. The first one was a bit too much. All right, and then we can put them in one by one. Come on. You should never over tighten spark plugs. That's a bad practice. Some people do that, and there's no need for that. Just give it a good turn and then lock it hand-wise on it with a small handle, so don't use a big lever to do that. There's really no need. The engine is cold, and what I've seen as well on the carburetor is that there is no choke. Very typical for people who think they are preparing a race car. Now that started up real nice, and it's running very smooth, I would say. I'm not going to start checking the ignition or anything like that, but that looks quite alright. And the engine is still cold, so I'm going to let it warm up now. But let's have a look in the back if it makes a lot of smoke or not. All right, so I'm going to start off the motor. I'm going to start up the motor, and then we're going to see how much smoke we get out of the exhaust pipe, if any, if it's blue smoke or whatever. I don't expect it because the compression turned out to be very nice, so I think this will be okay. But I'm going to start it up now, and keep in mind the engine is still cold, so you may see some condensation. The inside, that's a different story. I'm missing some rubbers on the side here, just this little piece. It's the same thing on the other side. The seats are very nice, and they look like leather seats, to be honest. They may be sky, but I think they're leather, so they're nice. It has no carpets, so I'm gonna have to put carpets in. And of course you can see all these things, openings here. There's no light switches, or not the proper switches. This is an emergency kill switch they put up to the outside. You got contact switches, but it's a bit tacky, I think. The guy had a good idea, but he never finished it off really. And the fascia, or the dashboard, is missing a meter right here. And that meter I have already laying around, so I have a meter for oil pressure and oil temperature, and this is a normal temperature meter for the water, and this is your normal speedometer. The door trim itself, that's quite nice. They have these nice handles on it, and I'll show you a close-up. So I think they renewed the door panels, which is good. But the fascia, I don't like. I don't like this wood. It just doesn't go together with the yellow part. So what I'm most likely going to do is I'm probably going to create an aluminum panel over this, the same shape, and I'm going to stick it on there. And in the middle, I probably do the same thing, but then, or I place a, what is it called again, a carbon foil on it, so it looks quite nice. And on this side I will actually remove this cover here. These are these little pockets. It's kind of weird, isn't it? And there's nothing you can put in really, but I will remove that and then put the aluminum panel up, and here I'm going to put a RPM meter up because I think that's important on a car like this. And for the rest, the lining on the roof is good, the doors, the seats are good, so I don't need to do much more on any of that. So let me give you a little bit of a close-up on the door trim, because that looks quite nice. Oh, by the way, and the steering wheel is neat as well. I love it. But we are missing the plastic cover around this. You know, there's a key here, you can see that, but it doesn't do nothing. It's just a steering lock. Starting the car is just happening over here. You know, you just need to turn that on, flip the ignition switch on, and then push this button. That's it. And to stop it, flip it down, power brake off. You know, this doesn't do anything. I don't know, I might leave it like this, but I need to clean it up. But certainly I want to have something around this steering rod here, or the column. I want to have that back, so I need to find that. Alright, so that's for the inside. But as I said, let me give you a close-up on the trim on the doors. The back seat is clean as well. I mean, it's like nobody has ever been in it. So this is good. I'm going to keep these seats. The color may not be right, and I was initially thinking of getting some Cobra seats, but then again, that's going to cause me issues on the technical inspection. Same thing for a roll cage. If you put one in, you really have a problem on the technical inspection. All right. See how nice this door trim is? It's really nice, and it works as well, amazingly. So this is quite neat. I think this is a nice feature. That's maybe also why I might even want to keep the aluminum dashboard, because that goes together with this with these fittings. So now let's have a check underneath the car, because I still need to find out that liquid leak, and I have a suspicion where I can find it. So let's move it up and see. All right, so let's check it out. Let's check first of all the subframe, and the red part, this is the subframe, and that's the part that typically goes very bad on a Mini, so often you will have to replace this. I see they have the standard suspension on it, which is good, but the subframe looks good. They have been welding on it, so that's been repaired. I also see, so that's a good thing. So now let's have a look on the brake system and the actual suspension itself on the wheels. So this is the main brake pipe coming from the front, and this is the distributor, and you can see they have like all new fittings, so Dave did a good new job. Then it goes back into flexibles to the rear drums. Now that all looks good as well. They have new flexes on it. That looks real good. I can say nothing wrong on that. Let's look on the other side. And there we have a very similar situation. Very clean, as you can see, nothing wrong with it, so I can't complain about that. On the rear wheels, the drums have been taken off. You can actually tell, and they have new bolts on it. They also put new bolts on the handbrake, and that all feels good. They're spinning all right, and the handbrake is working reasonably well when I tried it, and it also passed the CT. So, and I can see new shocks. These are standard shocks, but I was referring to the suspension before. And this is the typical suspension you'll find, and that's the standard non-adjustable suspension. It's a rod that fits all the way back to the other side. But what I have here is an adjustable suspension. Now this is a feature that I'm going to fit on, but I can't fit it on right now because I would not have passed the control technique. But I will fit an adjustable rear suspension. Now the welding, that isn't all that nice, but it's welded. But I would have rather have seen a clean weld or actually a brand new subframe, but they didn't do that. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this, if I'm going to take the subframe off or not. Probably not. I'm probably going to leave it like this. I might clean this weld up and then re-weld it. Don't know yet to be seen. It's not critical because it even passed the control technique, so they had no issues with that. The exhaust is nice. It's a stainless steel exhaust, pretty well mounted. It doesn't touch anything, which is good. And it runs nicely all the way to the back. So the welds are reasonable on it, not too bad, so that's good. There's no leaks on them, so that looks like all brand new. Even the supports are looking new, so that's a good point. I'm going to need some extra light here so you guys can actually see it. What you see here is the brake what you see here is the manual brake cable, and it slides over here, so you need to grease this area pretty well. But you can actually see that the cable isn't going over that hook. So that is a bit of an issue. So that is something that we will have to fix. It's a minor thing, but we got to fix it. And this is the hose coming from the fuel tank, and then you have a metal pipe all the way going back to the front of the car. And they kind of clamped it in badly. I don't like this. This is no good. I think this is standard fitting, but you know, it's metal on metal, and I'm not too keen on that one. I'm gonna change that. I put some insulation up and then close this nicely. And we have these special eyelets for that we can put up. And here we see the brake pipe, and again it's clamped in with this metal part. That I don't like at all. I know it's standard, but I'm going to change this with some nice eyelets with rubber on it to hold that into place, or at least insulate these areas. All right, so let's have a look now in the front. In the front we have discs, and the discs are as good as new, so that's a very good thing. All the joints are good because that's something they really check on the inspection, so nothing special on that, all good. And we have a new brake hose, a new flexible, so that's good. Let's have a closer look on the shock and see how the shock absorber looks like. Right, I don't know if you can see it, guys, but this car has actually Bilstein shocks mounted, so, and they look like quite new. Now I'm happy with that as well. And the red part that you see here, that is all the subframe. Now here we have something that I don't like to see. This is the exhaust pipe, and it's actually leaning onto the carter protection. This is a thick aluminum panel they put up, and the exhaust is actually leaning on it. There's also oil here. I don't know if you can see that, but we have oil. And I think that's the leak the technical inspection was referring to. But that's going to make very annoying noises when you drive, and it shouldn't be like this. And we have more oil drips right here. See that? I think that's why MOT had a problem with this. So I'm going to remove the panel and see where the leak is coming from, because with this panel in place I can hardly see it. In each case the panel has to go out, and we need to cut out a piece where the exhaust is sitting. So let's take out the panel and see where the leak is coming from. There is a lot of oil on this. I think we found the oil leak, and it's right here. It's the CV joint which is leaking oil, and it splatters it all around, as you can see. It's kind of fat grease, and it splattered it all the way up there, even on the exhaust here. And I think this gator might be gone, or there's a cut in it. I don't know yet, I can't feel it. But that's in each case the issue, so we'll have to take this whole thing apart. That also means taking the uprights off the car, the ball joints, and then remove the whole thing and recondition it. So let's have a look on the other side. And on the other side, we got exactly the same issue. Look, all the oil is coming out on this CV joint. And that's where the issue is. Exactly the same thing as on the other side. And in the front we have a conversion with discs, and the discs are like brand new, so that's good. The calipers are good, there's no leaks on them. The brakes feel a bit spongy, but I will change the brake fluid anyway, and then we'll see it, what happens. And for the rest, that looks quite alright. Here you can see the Bilstein shock, as what I mentioned before, so those are like brand new shocks. And the red stuff is the front subframe, which is in a very good condition. But I did notice that one of the bushes here are not all that good, so I will have to replace that one once I'm fixing the drive shafts, because I have to do that anyway. And here you actually see that bush, which is kind of like, I don't know, broken or squeezed together. It's weird, so that we need to replace. And on this side, things are very similar. And the bushes are looking okay. Overall, it's pretty tidy, and I think by the way, the wheels are only I think it's only the 10-inch wheels. I might try to fit the 12-inch if they fit, but that's just, you know, something I can do at the end. So guys, I've run you through the car as far as I could, and there are a few things we'll have to do on this car. Although it looks good and it drives good, there are still some defects on it, and I just listed them. So we have the trim on the edges on the outside of the vehicle, in the front and in the back. I need to fix the wheel arches. That doesn't cost me much. The trim is going to run me about 100 euros, by the way. The battery cable, well, that's just a grommet, that's easy. The boot cables, they're loose. I just need some tie wraps. That's going to be to no cost. Rubber seals around the hood and the bonnet. That's probably going to run me around 50 to 60 euros. I want to soundproof the bonnet in the front, so that's going to cost me another 50. I'm going to replace the carburetor with a Weber carburetor. Now that is to zero cost because I still have that laying around. But if you have to buy one, you should add at least another 500-600 euros to that, and I have to get the intake manifold anyhow, so that's probably about 100 euros for the intake manifold to match the Weber. I'm going to change the ignition to an electronic ignition, and that's going to run me about 250 euros. The brake fluid, yeah, I need to replace that one. That's cheap, 10 euros or so. The brakes feel a bit spongy, but that will be fixed when I'm bleeding them. I need to get a new carpet set because there are no carpets inside this vehicle, so I don't like that. That's going to run me another 250 euros. The compression test, by the way, was very good, so I'm happy with that one. We had about 13 kilograms in cylinder number 1, and then 12, 12, and 12. So that's pretty much balanced out. And I think number 1 is just because I played a bit with the gas throttle, the difference. So the carbon dioxide on the emission test, I haven't tested it myself, but it passed control technique or the MOT, so that must have been good. The CV joints is a major issue. That's where the leak was. That was the note on the MOT. We have to replace both left and right, and that's going to cost me about 300 euros to do that. I still need to change the bushes on the front suspension because one is crunched, so that's about 50 euros. And then of course I have some attachments to deal with, little connectors and all stuff like that, tie wraps and so on. That's like 10 euros. And I need to fit an RPM meter in the console, some aluminum panels, and I still need to fix or mount another dial in the fascia where there's a hole. Now that dial I have laying around as well. Now with the things I have laying around, I probably need to spend another 1,250 euros on this vehicle to get it in the shape I want to get it. And that's without adding a special camshaft and things like that. But what I think I'm going to be doing is I'm going to keep probably this motor as is. It's a very good motor. It sounds good, and I'm probably going to look for a 1270 motor or a 1375 motor that I can find somewhere, and get that tuned to a stage 3 and then swap out the engines. That is always an option. I have not included a roll cage yet, and I did not include special seats because that's going to be an issue for the MOT because they changed the rule set on that. So as you can see, we'll have a lot of videos to come on fixing this car up. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a bit of an oversight, but it's a checkout all around the car if you get it. So now, if you buy a car before it's been to MOT, then you have to do road tests, check the shocks. I mean, do a lot of tests, and especially check for rust because the Minis are very well known to be rusty. This one has been fixed before, so that looks quite good. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye-bye.